Hi guys, I hope you're all having a great day. Today I'm going to talk about getting out of a reading slump. So, it has been almost a year since I have made a YouTube video, and part of the reason for that is because when I go back into the school year, at the end of the summer I start planning for the school year, and it's a little overwhelming for me personally to handle balancing my work and my hobbies. And so at the end of a really long school day, I don't necessarily want to come home and film a video or edit. What I do want to do is come home and read. So in the fall of last year, I did a ton of reading, and I was so happy and so pleased with what I was reading. I had a great reading year last year. But then Christmas came, and I got a huge pile of wonderful books, but I wasn't necessarily inspired to read any of them. They were all really heavy books. I got some great nonfiction, some wonderful historical fiction, but I wasn't necessarily in the mood to read any of them. They were too heavy, and what I needed was something light and something fun. And, well, you see, what had happened was that I kind of resorted to Harry Potter. I hadn't read Harry Potter, or reread Harry Potter, I should say, in 2 years, and I was so proud of myself for focusing on reading books that were new to me and creating new experiences. But when I was in this place where I needed light reads, Harry Potter is what I resorted to. And as I'm thinking back on it, I felt a little bit like an addict. Like when things got stressful, that's what I needed. But lo and behold, I got through reading all of the Harry Potter books, and I still wasn't in the mood for any of the books that I had on my shelf, or that I got for Christmas that I should have been reading. Quotes, I'm gonna stop that. Then COVID happened, and I had a lot of time on my hands. And as I said, I'm a teacher, so what that actually looked like was, at first I was working like 10-hour days and 12-hour days, and that was just a little much. And so once I got into a good routine, I was able to slow down and get a ton of reading done. But I want to talk a little bit about how I got out of that reading slump during COVID, with all this lovely free time on my hands. And so I'll go ahead and get started on those 3 things. The first thing that helped get me out of my reading slump was having something fun to do with a book after I read it. Sometimes there's just this anticlimactic feeling where you finish with a book and you put it back on the shelf and you're thinking, well, what do I do with myself now? And for me, I still like to have time to process what I read and to still enjoy it. And so I was inspired by my husband to kind of get creative and draw something after I read or finished a book, if I felt like there was something I wanted to draw. So the book that got me thinking about this was The Wars of the Roses by Dan Jones. I read that, and it was hard for me to keep all the kings straight, and so I ended up taking notes, and then when I was done with my notes in this sketching journal, I drew pictures of the different kings and then put notes around them about what they did. And then when I was finished reading Harry Potter, I drew 2 things that I thought were really important from the story, and some themes that I picked up that were related to both of those 2 images. And I just had a lot of fun. And it was different than a bullet journal or a YouTube video because it was quick, it was simple, and there's no schedule. I didn't feel any pressure to create something for anybody else. This was just for me, and I really enjoyed it. So that gave me the space in between books to really mull over what I had read and enjoy it even more. The second thing that helped get me out of my reading slump was having a bookish community. Now we on BookTube, we know how important that is and we love it, but I hadn't really engaged in BookTube in a while, with a few exceptions. And so when COVID started and we began quarantining, I was teaching during the day, but I needed to get out of my house, and so I would go on walks, and I started listening to a podcast called What Should I Read Next? And it was so inspiring for me. I really wasn't reading a whole lot yet, but listening to the host and her guest talk about books and so many different books was so much fun and so inspirational for me. You guys have probably heard about this, but if you haven't, her podcast is great. She does, her setup is she has a guest on, she talks to her guest, finds out what they love to read, and then she recommends 3 books for them. And they talk about so many different books, even in one 45-minute or half-hour podcast, that it gave me tons of books to think about and put on my TBR, and some that I even wanted to read right away. For example, there was a discussion of audiobooks and Leanne Moriarty audiobooks in particular, and that really got me interested in Leanne Moriarty again. And so I read The Husband's Secret. It was a ton of fun. Fun is the wrong word for Leanne Moriarty books, but that's how I feel about them. I think they're fun. During her podcast, I learned a lot. I learned about the history of audiobooks, and I learned about eco-fiction, which it turns out I actually really enjoy, but I just had no idea that there was a name for it. Books about nature. Well, I should say novels about nature, I suppose, because it is fiction. And it was just so inspirational to me to hear about all these other books and hear about people just gush over books. It was a podcast that I really enjoy. I would definitely recommend if you haven't seen it. But also, on the note of community, something else that we did that really inspired me to keep reading or to pick up new books was David and I had a chat with some of our friends back in Virginia, Ryan and Kristen, from the YouTube video and podcast called Seeking Stories. And we sat down and we chatted with them for a good while. They were up really late because of the time difference. And it was so much fun. Every time we sit and chat with them, David and I just walk away so inspired to do anything creative. And for me, that's reading. So we really enjoyed that time that we got to spend together, and definitely look forward to seeing them more once we move back to the East Coast. So a bookish community or a book-related community was very inspirational for me. And the third thing that helped me get out of my reading slump was reading a book that was about books. I have never really done that. Well, I suppose The Book Thief is about books, but not to the extent that I'm talking about. I found on Hoopla an audiobook for The Secrets, Books, and Scone Society, which is a cozy mystery. I had never really read a cozy mystery, I don't think. So it was a whole new genre for me. But this particular cozy mystery series is set in a small town. The main character owns a bookshop. She does this weird thing called bibliotherapy, which was a ton of fun to read about. And the whole series, I've read the 3 that are available in audiobook, now I've listened to them. There are just books throughout. The whole series is based up around readers and books to give to different people, and it was so much fun. And it's a cozy mystery, so it's very light. I'm not necessarily recommending this book to everybody, but for me, it was a perfect book to get out of a reading slump because it was about books, and it was about people who loved books, and that was very inspiring for me. I'm definitely curious, how are you guys what are you reading during your quarantine? Although I know most places are beginning to lift the restrictions a little bit. Did you enjoy your quarantine reading, or did you go into a little bit of a reading slump? And when you're in a reading slump, how do you get out of it? What bookish communities do you really enjoy? What books are inspirational for you? Definitely share them in the comments below. Thanks, guys. I'll see you soon. Bye.